this is Ginger, and I'm going to tell you today about the top 4 most painful, grief-inducing experiences of my entire life. I am sharing these things because these are the moments of most growth that I have ever experienced in my life. And I think that that's the whole point of painful experiences. I think that we came here to learn with a specific curriculum of what we wanted to learn. And I feel like I want to honor what these painful events brought to me and also honor myself for going through them bravely and making it to the other side. Some of these events are something you would universally count as a tragedy, while others come with the connotation of joy. Every single one of these really hard things has made me into the badass bitch that you see sitting right here. So grief comes when you go through a huge change, whether it's positive or negative. Grief is not just a sadness after you lose something. It's actually your brain trying to reconcile these really disparate feelings that you're feeling and finding it really difficult to integrate that experience because you're unable to hold both feelings at the same time. And each one of these experiences I had was a death in some way, not necessarily the death of a person, but certainly the death of an identity that I had. And I think that you'll find with every time you're grieving, you're probably grieving the loss of a certain one of yourselves. So if you are going through any kind of hard grief right now, please know that it's all part of the process. This is what you came here to learn, and you can get through it, and you will. And without further ado, the death of my first marriage. Now, this is not your typical marriage divorce story. I had been with my boyfriend for 5 years. He was my best friend. We were both kind of directionless idealists. We were artists and we kind of didn't want to be held down by anything in life. After 4 years of being in that relationship, I kind of felt like it didn't have anywhere left to go, but I also didn't want to lose him. So I suggested we open up the relationship. Now, this is before we were married, and we can see who else is out there. I was 25 at that point, and there was still a lot of life I wanted to experience. So we did this. We opened our relationship, and I promptly started exploring all my options and enjoying myself and having all kinds of adventures, while my partner didn't do that so much. I think it's harder for men in that situation for many reasons. But I kept asking him over and over, "Are you still okay with this? You don't seem like you're having that good of a time, and I sort of feel like maybe you just said yes to this so you wouldn't lose me." And he kept on denying that anything was wrong. So I just kept living this life where I had my boyfriend at home who I really loved, and then guys that I was going out with. And by comparison, my boyfriend back home kind of started to lose his luster for me, and we really started to become just like BFFs, except BFFs that aren't telling each other truth about everything. At that point, I sort of thought I was never going to be monogamous in my life. I ended up asking him to marry me. "Hey, do you want to just like cement this right now and just get married and have a wedding so that we can enjoy that whole thing and then have our cake and eat it too?" Yeah, I know you're telling me this is a terrible idea. I wasn't really evaluating the whole situation with wisdom. Like I said, I was a complete dingus, low on life experience. But anyway, we did this whole production. They flew in from everywhere, and we had this big, awesome wedding. It was Indian themed for some reason, even though neither of us are Indian. I just love Indian weddings. Ugh, I swear. I don't know. We were officially married. We went back to Santa Monica where we lived and just continued our lives as they had been before. There was just something missing. There was something missing from my life, and I didn't really know what it was, but I knew that I wasn't happy, and I also wasn't growing as a person. I was not doing the work that later made me the person that I am, because I wasn't being challenged by my partner. And I see that now. Our time of growth in that relationship was just, it was over. But I was too scared to cut it. What ended up happening was I ended up meeting this guy who was like a terrible idea. I mean, just red flags abounded, okay? We had these rules in our open relationship. We didn't want to fall in love with somebody else. We were just trying to like keep it fresh. No. The thing that I didn't realize about myself was that I actually did just want to be passionately in love, because I was kind of in this like numb era. And so this guy came in to my life, picked me up on a Vespa and took me to the Chateau Marmont, bought me all kinds of awesome stuff, and did the Love Actually thing outside my window where he's holding cards. And this was the most like magnetic and charismatic and, dare I say, psychopathic person that I've ever been with. That story is for another day, but I fell hard in love with this person. And I told the truth to my husband. I said, I don't know what to do, because I'm so in love with this guy and I feel awful about it. Instead of fighting for me, he just recessed further. I'll just wait for you. I just felt like I was on a train that I could not stop. Everything in me wanted to just go blow up my life and be with this guy. There came a time when I just couldn't, and I ended up leaving that relationship that I had been in for like almost 7 years at the time. And it was like the hardest thing that I have ever done. I know you're probably thinking, oh, it was really hard. You had this hot guy that you left your husband for, blah, blah. Well, yeah, it was really hard, because this was my best friend. I didn't want to hurt him. And I also didn't want to not be true to myself. This was the grief that I'm talking about. These are the two separate things that I was trying to hold at the same time. One, that I want to be true to myself and I want to live my life in a passionate, like fulfilling way. And two is that I don't want to hurt the people that I love, but I'm going to have to hurt the person that I love to do this. I'm not only going to have to hurt him, but like everybody else who was invested in our relationship, who came to the wedding. And it was like I was jumping off a cliff into a pit of lava, and I could see the lava, but I was just like, see ya! I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Once I was with him, once I did what he wanted me to do, which is leave my husband and go with him, he ended up needing a mom instead of a partner. It went from the sexiest, most passionate relationship to the grossest. He just was like in bed all day. He was totally scatterbrained. He didn't do anything for me anymore. He started like secretly taking my money. Just, oh, it was so bad. And yeah, I deserved it. Yes. Okay. I felt like I was getting my karma for sure. And when I left him, that was my return of Saturn. And this was like the first time in my life where I was truly, truly alone. Alone. I had not done that. I had been with some sort of monogamous boyfriend since I was about 13 years old. This was a lesson that I needed to learn, was how to be alone. I didn't know where to go. I was so broke. I had a lot of friends, and I just emailed all of the female friends that I knew and was like, hey, listen, this is what I just did. And I realized that it's my fault, but I need help. Can anyone help me get a job that pays good money? And can anyone help me find a place to live right now? And all these people responded. So this was another karma for me, because I had been kind to a lot of people and they were returning the kindness. So I ended up having a place to live for free because a girlfriend had a whole duplex. Another friend helped me get a job. I ended up getting on my feet and getting myself a new apartment. But during that time, I was in the deepest grief. I was working all the time, and if I wasn't working, I was sobbing, just sobbing my eyes out, because I felt like I had disappointed every single person in my entire life. I felt like they all thought I was crazy. I had broken the heart of this person that I loved, and he wouldn't talk to me. I don't think he could possibly understand then that it was necessary. I needed, first of all, to learn how to be alone, and then in a long-term relationship, I needed to find somebody who would challenge me to be my best self. So that was my very first hella grief experience. Part of me didn't think I was going to ever recover, but the other part of me knew that I had to do my damnedest to try. I got so methodical and so focused for the first time in a very long time. Here's what I need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It was like a video game I was playing from then on to get back on my feet. I was really actively doing self-improvement. When I recovered from that I really felt like, oh, this is me. This is who I am. And I felt strong for the first time because I was relying only on myself. And that's the lesson that came out of that experience. Number 2 on the list is maybe a bit controversial because it's actually, in fact, the best thing that has ever happened to me. And that is becoming a mother. And you may be wondering, well, what's the death in that? The death is the death of my identity as what you would call a maiden, I guess. I was not planning on having kids at that very moment. The person I was when I became pregnant, I was an actor, I was a surfer, I was a girl about town, I was a free spirit, a yogi, and I survived on gigs. It was a very free and colorful life. But my boyfriend at the time and I just decided we're gonna do this, and then we found out that it was twins, a boy and a girl. I was really happy, but I was terrified. I felt like I was not prepared. I felt like our relationship had some crunchy parts that needed to be fixed before we could be good parents. And indeed, that was true. But we were committed and we barreled forward. Pregnancy off the bat did not agree with me, man. I'm not the type of person who wants to give myself over to something unless that's what I decided to do. And at that moment, at first, it didn't feel like I had decided that. Even though that's not true, because if you look in my journals and stuff, I was asking the universe for this. But because of my lack of preparedness, I sort of felt like I didn't have a choice in the matter and that this was thrust upon me. This is where the grief comes of holding two different things true at the same time. I wanted these babies more than anything. I knew that this was my calling and I knew that this was meant to be. But also, I could not deny the part of me that was just like, okay, your life as you know it is over. You are no longer the star of the show. The possibilities to me felt like they went from being out here to like getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. We started going to like these twin parent groups. I thought that would help me to get some perspective. We were the only ones in those groups who didn't do IVF. We were the only ones who were just like, oh, we just accidentally had twins. I went to this twin parent group like on a skateboard with my Vans on, and everyone else in that group was like, we've been trying for so long and we finally got pregnant and we're so excited. And I was just like, there's no one to empathize with me right now. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me in a lot of ways, and that I was gonna be expected to be this new thing. All of these ideas of what I thought a mother should be, the most loving, the most responsible, the most organized. I read every single book on pregnancy. I studied and studied and studied. I was determined to be the best, even though I felt this hormonal thing taking over, just like this. Ugh. I had to sleep 16 hours a day at some points during that pregnancy because I was building 2 humans and 2 placentas in my belly. And then the birth itself was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. From all the reading I had done, I was convinced that I was going to be able to do it in this certain way. When it came time, they induced me with Pitocin. Oh my gosh, it was so awful. We went in on Tuesday at 5 p.m. We were still there on Thursday morning at 7 a.m., at which point I had not slept. I was basically like hallucinating. I was just like, get them out of me. I had so not wanted to have a C-section. It was so disappointing to me. Then I had the kids, and my husband was a full-time student going back to school for engineering. So he was only there as much as he could be there, and I was without my family, without any help whatsoever, without much money, and now I was in charge of taking care of 2 newborns. One of them was always needing to nurse. Neither one of them were like easy babies. They came into this world with an agenda, man. I'm so glad they're like that now that they're 7 years old. But for the whole first 2 years, I was so underslept, and I was at like the bottom of the barrel because I loved these two beings more than anything I could possibly have imagined. I was determined to make their lives joyful, yet I had had to give up everything I had ever known that made me who I am. I mean, at least temporarily. When I look back now at the videos of them when they were little babies, the videos all look like we are having the best time, and they look like I'm the happiest person in the world. It's like I remember all of these really, really tough times that the videos do not show. I was not allowing myself to acknowledge that it was grief because it was not supposed to be a sad time. It was supposed to be a happy time. And this is one of those times that taught me that nothing lasts forever. Nothing bad that you're going through is going to last forever. I thought at the time that this was my new normal forever, that I would just be like under this mountain of laundry and nursing, that I would be broke and unable to have a social life, artistically unfulfilled. I thought that drowning was my new normal, but it is not the case. I think back to all of those awesome times we had, wearing them around and taking them to every park and every beach and every hike, and just cuddling with them and them nursing for 2 years. And those are now memories that I've integrated as like, oh, that was such a beautiful, beautiful time. But like, it still holds so much weight. That whole experience taught me that I can do anything. I am so strong. I am so flexible. I am so resilient. And I am able to ask for help when I need it. And I learned a lot about myself becoming a new mom, but I certainly had to mourn that old me. And what I gained and the new person I was ended up being so much better than the old me. The next most difficult grief-inducing thing was moving. We moved from my beloved Santa Monica to Northern California when the kids had just turned 3 years old. They still were pretty labor intensive at that time, but they were no longer nursing and they were a little bit more independent. So I got like little pockets of time where I could rest or do my own thing. And I wanted to move because this meant that we would get to live in a house instead of a tiny little apartment, all these little parks and this whole community and wonderful schools. Yet when we got up here, it was the middle of COVID. The people here were all staying inside all the time. And if they let their kids go to a park, they would mask their kids outdoors. I tried to make friends. I tried and I tried, but nobody was in the market for friends here at that time. And so I was so lonely and everything was closed. So it was really, really hard for a mom with 3-year-olds and no friends. And I kept on counting my blessings and I kept on trying to look at the bright side. It was especially a tough time in my marriage too, because my husband was still going to school. He was working hard and I was at home all the time with the kids, and we just couldn't see eye to eye because we didn't understand what the other was going through. And I started to really, really grieve LA. I had lived there for 11 years and I was one of those people who was just obsessed with my city. It was especially poignant to see all the things that I had lost. And this was yet another death of identity. I was no longer an Angeleno, which I had defined myself as for a long time. Every new experience I had, I was comparing it to my old life. All the people that I was now encountering were all parents. So was I, so that was good. But it seemed like here in a small town, it was hard to see that they had other interests besides their kids. This is when I ended up starting a band 2 hours away in a city. Because if I didn't have LA, at least I could say I had my band and my art and my songwriting and all this whole group of friends who are interesting to me. That helped me a lot. And now we've been here over 4 years and we're really integrated into the community here. I can see now that even though most people are parents, most of these people are really interesting. I think it was so hard at that early parenting stage because all the other parents of little kids, little toddlers and babies were also in the trenches just like I was. And when you're in the trenches like that, you're interrupted literally every sentence by somebody needing something of you. You do feel identity-less because there's not really much self to talk about for most people. And even though I didn't have any like parents to commiserate with me who were also artists, which I would have had in LA, but what I did discover here was that these people were good, solid people and they would be there for you if you needed them. And it was a really awesome, like trustworthy community. And I'm so grateful for it. It took me a while to grieve the loss of my city. I had to do like some cord cutting meditations and a lot of writing. And eventually, I finally was able to see that, yes, even though that was a part of me, this new me is able to encompass so much more than that person was. And I've become a kinder, more intuitive, better communicator, someone that can be relied on, and someone who I respect. And the number one grief-inducing, painful experience of my life has been the death of my parents. My dad actually died in 2019 when my kids were 2 years old. He died of cancer, and it happened pretty quickly, within a year of him finding out. My husband was emotionally not able to be there for me. He didn't know how to respond because he had never experienced anything like that before. And I was not doing a very good job of voicing my needs because my grief was coming out as anger because I was just looking at him like, do you not see what I'm dealing with over here? I just lost my dad and you're we got through that, and he later understood that he had not been there for me like he should have, and he really apologized about it. And then last year, right after my birthday and right before her birthday, my mom died. And this was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through because just like my dad, she was given a diagnosis a year before, and her diagnosis was ALS. If you don't know what ALS is, your muscles start deteriorating. Your voice goes. It's one of the first things to go often. And with my mom, that was the case. My mom and I have always been very, very close. And I always talked to her on the phone almost every day. And there was a time during the year when she stopped being able to talk to me on the phone. So it was like I lost her early because after that I could only just send her little voice messages and then she would type back very short little messages. So that anticipatory grief was like the hardest grief I have ever had to go through because every single day the duality I was dealing with was this. A, I do not want my mom to die. Please don't die, Mom. And then B, she's miserable. Like, she so wants to go. It's so obvious to me that she doesn't want to be here anymore. And so I want her to be comfortable and happy. I don't want her to be miserable. On one hand, I'm like hoping it just happens quickly so that I can get over this because I'm not able to move on. I'm just in grief every single second of every single day. So that whole year, everything I did, whether I would be like on tour with my band, crying in the hotel room and feeling guilty about going and living life while my mom was dying. And I would go and visit her every chance I could and stay with her and just be present with her as much as I could. But it was like part of her was already gone because she wasn't the mom that I had known. And somewhere in that year, I transitioned, and here's the death of identity again. I transitioned from being the one who is being taken care of to the one who is doing the taking care. And it was like a really hard transition because I'm old now and I'm a mom and everything, but it was so comforting to know she was just going to be there when I called. Anytime I called, she would always be there. And then suddenly she just wasn't. That was like the most jarring, you're on your own realization that I've ever had. And it was something that I needed in order to transition into becoming a fully fledged adult who is in my power. Because as long as you're depending or relying on somebody else to like make you feel better or to help you out with any kind of problem, you're not acknowledging your own power. But when my mom passed away, I realized that I was alone. And sometimes being alone is not a bad thing. After that really hard year of suffering was over, there was a relief that happened because I knew that she wasn't hurting anymore and she wasn't feeling guilty. Because there were times I could feel she was feeling guilty for not fighting to stay here. She had surrendered, and the heaviness kind of lifted when my mom finally crossed over. And what happened was all of those things that she represented to me, I knew she was no longer in this world. So I had to integrate every single one of those things into who I am. So every single trait in her that I loved and respected, I took those things and I put them into me. I became all of the best parts of her. And I feel like that's just the natural progression of things. And I know that there will be more, and I dread that. I really dread that. But I will be able to move through it, and I will be an even stronger, more compassionate, and better person on the other side of it. So, for anyone else who's out there going through grief, please know the only way out is through. And the more readily you're able to face it head on, the faster you will get through it. And when you do get through it, you're going to be so proud of the person you are, and you're going to be so grounded in that person. And maybe you'll even be able to be grateful for the experience that brought you here.